So he put a gun to my head. Trump's vigilantes choose bullets over ballots. Your latest post over at gregpalast.com for folks who have the wisdom and good sense to go there and sign up for your mailing list. Tell us about it.
Okay, well, what happened is that in 2020, after the last presidential election, we had a air conditioning repairman was run off the road. His truck was slammed, and he was run off the road. A guy named Aguirre pretended that he had ran over to him and said, "Help me, help me." And when the air conditioning repairman, who didn't know what was going on, why he was run off the road, tried to help him out, the guy pulls a gun on him, puts a gun to his head, said, "Get out of the truck. Show me the ballots." And he told him to get on the ground, put a gun to his head. And then he made the driver open the back of his truck, where he had thought, this vigilante thought, that there were 750,000 stolen illegal ballots that were filled out for Joe Biden. And when he opened the back of the repair truck, of the air conditioning repair truck, what he found was not 750,000 ballots, but he found air conditioning supply parts.
Right.
Houston cops showed up because they didn't know why a truck was run off the road. They see a man with a gun to someone else's head. They arrest him. Turns out that the guy himself was an ex-cop. He was one of almost 50 detectives hired by a right-wing billionaire to prove that Donald Trump had won, that the Democrats were stealing votes, literally 750,000 ballots. So I went there, talked to Commissioner Rodney Ellis of Harris County. Harris County is Houston. And what they were claiming was that Commissioner Rodney Ellis, who is the first black man elected commissioner in Harris County, that is Houston, that he had personally forged 750,000 ballots. And I spoke to Commissioner Ellis, who's also a successful lawyer, and asked him how he forged 750,000 ballots, because that would take him something like 200 years and a few seconds a ballot. So you could laugh at this, but it was, again, this guy Aguirre was paid $250,000 to hunt down the air conditioning repairman who was holding the ballots for Rodney Ellis. That's just the beginning of the story, but that's the core. This is the new vigilante violence that I'm worried about that will erupt even more later. But this, again, this was not some lone crazy. This was one of 50 detectives hired, paid $250,000 each by this right-wing billionaire. What Ellis had done also is that he had, it was during COVID, remember, the last election.
Mm-hmm.
So to try to prevent the people of Houston from dying while waiting in line for hours, he was going to send out ballots. The commissioner, the first black commissioner of Harris County, was going to send out 2.5 million ballots to the voters of Houston. It was stopped by Ken Paxton, who is the Republican Attorney General of Texas. And so Paxton stopped the mailing out of the ballots, and he got on Steve Bannon's War Room and said, if I didn't stop those 2.5 million ballots going out to the voters of Houston, Donald Trump would have lost Texas. He said that. Right,
which is another way of saying, as you have been saying for a long, long time, and I have been echoing you and citing you, and in fact, I think we had a brief conversation about this yesterday morning as you and I and Mr. DiCaprio were walking around Lake Hollywood at this hour.
Yeah. George DiCaprio is my producer.
Yeah, yes. and produced the show. Is that Georgia, Florida, and Texas are really blue states, and the only way the Republicans are hanging on is by preventing people from voting or preventing their votes from being counted.
Exactly. And in fact, like I say, Ken Paxton himself said that if he didn't stop Rodney Ellis from letting people vote, make it easy for people to vote during COVID, Donald Trump would have lost Texas, no question.
Yep. It's amazing. So another thing that I learned from your movie, and I just can't speak highly enough about this. And as I mentioned, this movie Vigilantes Inc., America's Voter Suppression Hitman, is going to be available to watch for free over at gregpalast.com. And you know, if you've got Apple computer, Apple TV, you can just stream it, or for that matter, Android too. You can stream it right to your TVs, you know, and watch it on your TV. Is that the Klan reincorporated using a particular name back in the 20s, as I recall. You correct me on this. And
Yes.
now
1946.
1946. Okay, thank you. They reincorporated under a particular name, and now that name has come up again with the governor of Georgia, who has an interesting history. You want to tell us that story?
Yes. Well, back in 1946, the Klan had a plan, and the plan was to challenge every black voter in Georgia, and to cover their tracks, because the Klan wasn't all that popular in 46 after World War II, and black soldiers were promised by Franklin Roosevelt that they would have the right to vote. So to cover their tracks.
And Harry Truman was doing it.
Yeah. And so what they said was that they were going to challenge every black voter. So they reincorporated as Vigilantes Inc. So they corporatized themselves to cover their tracks. However, the FBI came in and said this was a violation of the 15th Amendment to the Constitution and Equal Protection Clause as well. You fill that in. And they were going to arrest. Oh, I should mention that the reason that they challenged almost all black voters in Georgia was that the Klan's effective leader, Eugene Talmadge, was running for governor. And Talmadge won by wiping out the black vote.
Yep.
And the FBI went to investigate about the challenges. And when they went to investigate, the retaliation was that two returning black servicemen and their wives were shot dead, to make the point that if you're black, you may not want to vote. In fact, Eugene Talmadge used the phrase, "It would be wise for Negroes to avoid white polling stations."
Yep.
And so they
which is the same thing Ron DeSantis and Gray Abbott are saying right now, arresting black people for voting.
Exactly. So, but back in 46, the FBI was about to arrest Governor Talmadge, but literally days before his arrest, he drank himself to death.
Yeah. Yeah. Now,
So,
hasn't Greg Abbott, or excuse me, Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, former Secretary of State, hasn't he done something now called vigilantes? I mean, doesn't the word vigilantes now appear in his Senate bill that authorizes this sort of thing, or am I misremembering?
Well, there's two things. There are groups that have reorganized themselves. One involving Cleta Mitchell, Trump's lawyers, and they are using the term Vigilantes Inc. again. They have challenged, let me explain. The vigilante law in Georgia says that you or I or anyone else can challenge another voter's right to vote. And they have. When they took this vigilante game out for a test drive in 2022, you had 88 vigilantes personally challenge the votes of about 180,000, almost entirely a group of black voters challenge 180,000 voters. It was almost enough challenges that Biden would have lost Georgia if this game hadn't been stopped. But now they changed the rules again, and now we're going from 88 vigilantes in Georgia to, are you ready? 40,000 vigilantes have signed up with with the vigilante organization True the Vote.
These are all white people who are going in and challenging the right of black people to vote. And once you've been challenged, you have to show up in person at the Secretary of State's office to prove who you are, or your vote doesn't count, or you can't vote, right?
You have to physically show up, and you were with us at the opening with Major Gamaliel Turner. He was from Fort Benning, Georgia, and he was assigned. The major, he's the America's expert on warfare of the future, and he was assigned to California. And so his vote was challenged by a top Republican Party official among he was among the 180,000 voters challenged.
Yeah.
And they said, when he said, how do I get my vote back? They said, well, just come into our office. He says, I'm 2,600 miles away. I'm trying to vote and get my absentee
Right. He was
ballot.
serving with the Army.
Yes, he was. He was a top military consultant.
Right. He was the Army's top expert on the warfare of the future.
Yes. So
that's amazing.
So So again, he was told he just has to show up. And by the way, he did. But the guy who challenged him, a guy who actually dresses like a vigilante, he dresses like you'll see in the film. The guy dresses up as Doc Holliday. He really does.
Yep.
With loaded, I should point out, the pearl-handled 6 guns and the hat and boots and his fly open, by the way.
Yeah.
You'll see
It was all pretty wild. It was pretty. So anyhow, you got to see this movie. It's gregpalast.com. You can sign up for it. It'll be available starting on Friday for free, and it's mind-blowing. Vigilantes, Inc. is the movie. Greg Palast is the brilliant guy who brings it to you. Hang on just a second, Greg. We're going to get stepped on.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greg, thank you again. Wonderful sharing the day with you yesterday and the day before, and I look forward to this movie getting huge distribution.
Thank you.